And I do not need Representative Yoho to apologize to me. Clearly, he does not want to. Clearly, when given the opportunity, he will not. And I will not stay up late at night waiting for an apology from a man who has no remorse over calling women and using abusive language towards women. But what I do have issue with is using women, our wives and daughters, as shields and excuses for poor behavior. Mr. Yoho mentioned that he has a wife and 2 daughters. I am 2 years younger than Mr. Yoho's youngest daughter. I am someone's daughter too. My father, thankfully, is not alive to see how Mr. Yoho treated his daughter. My mother got to see Mr. Yoho's disrespect on the floor of this house towards me on television. And I am here because I have to show my parents that I am their daughter and that they did not raise me to accept abuse from men. Now, what I am here to say is that this harm that Mr. Yoho tried to levy against me was not just an incident directed at me. But when you do that to any woman, what Mr. Yoho did was give permission to other men to do that to his daughters. In using that language in front of the press, he gave permission to use that language against his wife, his daughters, women in his community. And I am here to stand up to say that is not acceptable. I do not care what your views are. It does not matter how much I disagree or how much it incenses me or how much I feel that people are dehumanizing others. I will not do that myself. I will not allow people to change and create hatred in our hearts. And so what I believe is that having a daughter does not make a man decent. Having a wife does not make a decent man. Treating people with dignity and respect makes a decent man. And when a decent man messes up, as we all are bound to do, he tries his best and does apologize. Not to save face, not to win a vote. He apologizes genuinely to repair and acknowledge the harm done so that we can all move on. Lastly, what I want to express to Mr. Yoho is gratitude. I want to thank him for showing the world that you can be a powerful man and accost women. You can have daughters and accost women without remorse. You can be married and accost women. You can take photos and project an image to the world of being a family man and accost women without remorse and with a sense of impunity. It happens every day in this country. It happened here on the steps of our nation's capital. It happens when individuals who hold the highest office in this land admit to hurting women and using this language against all of us. But once again, I thank my colleagues for joining us today. I will reserve the hour of my time, and I will yield to my colleague, Representative Jayapal of Washington.
Let Biden sit through an interview like this. He'll be on the ground crying for mommy. He'll say, "Mommy, mommy, please take me home."
We have the 7th highest mortality rate in the world. Our mortality rate is higher than Brazil. It's higher than Russia, and the European Union has us on a travel ban.
When you talk about mortality rates, I think it's the opposite. I think we have one of the lowest mortality
That's not
rates
true,
in the
sir.
world. We're going to take a look.
We had 900 deaths on a single day.
We will take a look.
This week.
Ready?
You can check it out.
Could you please get me the mortality rate?
Yeah.
Kaylee's right here. I heard we had one of the lowest, maybe the lowest mortality rate anywhere in the world. You have the numbers, please? Because I heard we had the best mortality rate.
These data similarly to many countries, as Dr. Burks points out. This is
Number one low mortality rate. I hope you show this scenario because it shows what fake news is all about. Okay, go
I don't
ahead.
think I'm fake news, but I will put
Well,
our.
there you were.
Hot enough for you here, Mr. President?
It's hot. It's about, well, sort of almost record-breaking.
You know, we wanted to do it inside. This was your choice.
But I wanted you to sweat a little bit.
Well, we both are.
Biden wants to fund the place.
Sir, he does not.
Look, he signed a charter with Bernie Sanders. I will get that one, just like I was right on the mortality rate. Did you read the charter that he agreed to?
It says nothing about defunding the
Oh,
police.
really? It says abolish. It says fund. Let's go.
All right.
Get me the charter, please.
All right,
Chris,
ta-da.
you've got to start studying for these.
He says defund the police.
He says defund the police. They talk about abolishing the police. They talk about illegal aliens pouring.
I look forward to seeing that.
When people proudly had their Confederate flags, they're not talking about racism. They love their flag. It represents the South. They like the South. People right now like the South. I say it's freedom of many things, but it's freedom of speech.
So you're not offended by it?
Well, I'm not offended either by Black Lives Matter. That's freedom of speech. I think that Fort Bragg, Fort Robert E. Lee, all of these forts that have been named that way for a long time, decades and decades.
But the
and
military
decades.
says they're for this.
Excuse me. I don't care what the military says. 1492, Columbus discovered America. You know, we grew up, you grew up, we all did. That's what we learned. Now they want to make it the 1619 Project. Where did that come from? What does it represent? I don't even know.
It's slavery.
That's what they're saying, but they don't even know. They just want to make a change.
You still have more than 100 days to this election, but at this point, you're losing.
First of all, I'm not losing because those are fake polls. They were fake in 2016, and now they're even more fake. Let's take a test. Let's take a test right now. Let's go down. Joe and I will take a test. Let him take the same test that I took.
Incidentally, I took the test too when I heard that you passed it.
Yeah, how did you do it?
Well, it's not the hardest test.
No, but
it
the
is,
last...
There's a picture and it says, what's that? And it's an elephant.
No. You see, that's all misrepresentation.
Well, that's what it was on the web.
It's all misrepresentation. Because, yes, the first few questions are easy, but I'll bet you couldn't even answer the last 5 questions. I'll bet you couldn't. They get very hard, the last 5
Well,
questions.
one of them was count back from 100 by 7.
And let me tell you,
93.
you couldn't answer
All right, what's the question?
many of the questions. I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do.
Are you suggesting that you might not accept the results of the election?
I have to see. Look, Hillary Clinton asked me the same thing.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the
I
election?
have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no. And I didn't last time either. I'm not a big fan of Fox. I'll be honest with you.
For her to be described as a threat as opposed to a girl who's crying out for help, which is what this is indicative of. If Grace was a 15-year-old white girl, she would not be in jail. That's the simplest way. If we think about it in those terms, the adultification of girls of color, where we treat them as if they're more mature than they are, is exactly what's happening here. And there's a harsher penalty statistically given to girls of color, even when we look at suspension rates versus any other group of ethnicity, but definitely that transitions into incarceration rates. She should not be in jail. She needs therapy. She needs help. She needs a support system. She needs a safe place for her voice to be heard. She needs healing of the trauma that she's experienced. Even coming out of this, the trauma she'll probably deal with for the rest of her life. To teach her a lesson and make this a political issue, this is not the time for that. How are the children doing? That's how you judge a community. How are our children? And our children are not okay with this happening. We're not okay as a community having this happen. And so that part of it right there is where the systemic racism is resident.
This is a map of the continents of the Earth showing how much ultraviolet light lands in each latitude. It turns out the closer you are to the equator, the more intense the ultraviolet. We use reds and purples. But then as you move away from the equator, we change the colors to orange, yellow, greens, and grays. Now here's the same map of the same continent with just one color. And it turns out that everybody on Earth is descended from people that live here in Africa. And then as groups of us moved around the world, the color of our skin had to change. And here's why. Our skin is where we make vitamin D. If you don't get enough ultraviolet, you don't get enough vitamin D. But if you get too much ultraviolet, then you break down your folates. You have to have it in perfect balance. And because the ultraviolet varies, the color of our skin varies. And that's it, everybody. That's why we have different colored skin. But we're all one species. But we're not treating each other fairly. Not everybody's getting an even shake. So it's time to change things. So the reason we want you to wear a mask is to protect you, sure. But the main reason we want you to wear a mask is to protect me from you and the particles from your respiratory system from getting into my respiratory system. Everybody, this is a matter literally of life and death. And when I use the word literally, I mean literally a matter of life and death. So when you're out in public, please wear a mask. Thank you for joining me on Consider the Following.
I've been sick since the day I turned 27. It's been over a month now. They told me that my appendix was the size of a baseball. They also removed part of my colon, and they told me that coronavirus had literally, quote, been a lightning strike to my body. My body just wasn't able to fight it all off. So on the 23rd, I started feeling the flu-like symptoms, pretty much every coronavirus symptom that there is, except for the fever and shortness of breath. I never had a fever until after I was in the hospital. On June 26th, I was finally able to get tested. I tried to get tested on the 25th and they ran out of tests. So the 26th, I was tested for coronavirus. I got my results back on the 30th as positive. I started to feel better after the 2 weeks. And then my flu-like symptoms came back with a very, 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 very severe abdomen pain. So I let that go for 2 days. It didn't get better. So on July 9th, I went to the emergency room with the abdomen pain, and they kept me for 11 days. They tested me again on that day, and I tested positive again for coronavirus. And they, after running numerous tests, they told me that my appendix had ruptured and it needed to come out immediately. The OR team actually told me that I was one of several gastrointestinal patients that they had seen that also had coronavirus, so they think that there's some kind of connection. It's just the fact that we don't know enough about this disease at this point. I really still don't feel good. I don't really have a timeline to return to work still at this point. So it's definitely something to take seriously. And like I said, even with me covering the story, knowing how serious it was, even I was guilty of thinking of, okay, you know, if I get it, I'm down 2 weeks and I'll be okay. And I am okay, fortunately. But I don't know how this will affect me, you know, for the rest of my life. They told me that when I left the hospital, my lungs sounded good for a COVID patient, but they are diminished. My chest x-rays, they said, looked okay. So I don't have a ton of lung damage, fortunately, but I am missing part of my colon now. And, you know, I could have stuff pop up later on. They just don't know at this point.